The rain fell steadily across the grand estate, each droplet catching the warm golden light from the ornate street lamps that lined the circular driveway. Emma stood at the magnificent iron gates, her bare feet cold against the wet cobblestones, watching the water cascade down the intricate metal. The mansion beyond rose like something from a fairy tale, its Gothic spires reaching toward the storm clouds, every window glowing with the promise of warmth and comfort. She shifted Tommy's weight in her arms, feeling his small body shiver despite the thin blanket wrapped around him. At 3 years old, he was getting heavy, but Emma barely noticed anymore. Carrying him had become as natural as breathing, a constant reminder of the precious life that depended on her every decision. The November evening air bit through her worn cardigan, the fabric so threadbare, it offered little protection against the cold. Emma could feel the dampness seeping through to her skin, but she didn't move away from the gates. This mansion represented her last hope, her final attempt to find some way to feed her son before the night grew darker. She had walked for miles to reach this place, following vague directions from a woman at the shelter, who had mentioned wealthy neighborhoods where people sometimes needed help. Emma hadn't found any help wanted signs, but she had found this mansion, its lights beckoning like a lighthouse in her storm of desperation. Her stomach cramped with hunger, a familiar ache that had become her constant companion. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, giving her last piece of stale bread to Tommy while pretending she had already eaten. The lie came easily now, just another small sacrifice in the endless list she had made for her son's survival. Emma pressed her face against the cold iron bars, studying the house more carefully. Every window seemed to glow with abundance, and she could almost imagine the warm dinners being served inside, the full refrigerators, the comfort that these wealthy people probably took for granted. She wasn't asking for much, just a chance to work to earn a single meal. Taking a deep breath that misted in the cold air, Emma found the intercom button beside the gate. Her finger trembled as she pressed it, the electronic chime echoing across the rain-soaked grounds. She waited, counting her heartbeats, wondering if anyone would answer at this late hour. "Hello." The voice through the speaker was deep and cultured, with the kind of confidence that comes from never worrying about where the next meal will come from. "I'm sorry to disturb you," Emma began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know it's late, but I was wondering. I don't want charity. I just need work. Could I clean your house or do dishes for a plate of food? Something small. My son is so hungry." There was a long pause, and Emma feared the person had simply walked away. Then she heard footsteps on gravel, growing closer, and her heart began to race. Through the rain, she could see a tall figure approaching the gate with measured, deliberate steps. The man who appeared before her seemed to embody everything elegant about the mansion itself. He wore an expensive charcoal overcoat that it fit perfectly, his dark hair styled despite the late hour. But it was his eyes that caught Emma's attention, those striking green eyes that seemed to look right through her current circumstances to something deeper. He stood frozen on his side of the gate, his hand gripping the iron bars so tightly his knuckles turned white. His face had gone pale, as if all the blood had drained away, and his lips parted slightly as he stared at her with complete shock. "Emma," the word fell from his lips like a prayer, soft and disbelieving. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear the rain from her eyes as she studied his face more intently. There was something achingly familiar about the way he stood, the slight tilt of his head when thinking, the small scar above his left eyebrow that she remembered from childhood adventures. "James." Her voice cracked on his name, barely audible above the steady drumming of rain. James Mitchell stepped back from the gate, running both hands through his hair in a gesture so familiar it made Emma's chest tighten with memories. "I can't believe it's really you. After all these years." They had been everything to each other once, back when Emma's family lived in the modest house across town, before life had pulled them in different directions. James had been her first love, her best friend, the boy who had promised they would always find their way back to each other. "Please, come inside," James said urgently, fumbling with the gate controls. "You're soaking wet, and it's freezing out here." Emma hesitated, suddenly aware of how she must appear to him. Her blonde hair hung in wet tangles, and her clothes were not just worn but torn in places. She felt ashamed to bring such obvious poverty into his world of success. "James, I don't want to drip water all over your beautiful home," she whispered. "I don't care about water damage," he said firmly, his voice thick with emotion. "I care about you, both of you." The gate swung open with a soft hum, and James stepped forward, gently placing his hand on Emma's elbow to guide her up the driveway. His touch was exactly as she remembered, warm and reassuring, making her feel safe for the first time in months. The mansion's front door was carved from rich dark wood and adorned with gleaming brass fixtures. James led them into a foyer that took Emma's breath away, with its soaring ceiling, crystal chandelier, and marble floors that reflected their every step. "Wait here," James said softly, disappearing and returning quickly with thick, luxurious towels. "Here, wrap Tommy in this one. It's warm from the dryer." As Emma carefully dried her son's hair, she found herself telling James everything. The words poured out like water through a broken dam. She told him about her marriage to David, a man who had seemed kind during courtship but revealed his true nature after the wedding. She described the escalating arguments, the drinking, the night when David had raised his hand to Tommy, and she had finally found the courage to leave. She explained how difficult it had been to find steady work while caring for a toddler, how they had moved from shelter to shelter, how her small savings had dwindled to nothing. She told him about selling her winter coat to buy Tommy's medicine, about giving up her own meals so her son could eat. James listened without interrupting, his green eyes never leaving her face, his expression growing more pained with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I looked for you," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "After college, after I started the company, I hired investigators, searched everywhere, even drove by your old neighborhood hoping to find some trace of where you had gone. I never stopped wondering what happened to you. You looked for me." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Emma, you have to understand, you were everything to me. When we lost touch, when your family moved away, I felt like half of my soul had been ripped away. I built all of this," he gestured around the opulent foyer, "but none of it ever felt like home because you weren't here to share it." They moved to his library, a room lined with leather-bound books and warmed by a crackling fireplace. James insisted on making Emma a proper meal himself, while Tommy slept peacefully on a plush sofa. James and Emma sat beside the fire, sharing stories of the years that had separated them. James told her about building his technology company from nothing, about the long hours that had eventually made him wealthy beyond his childhood dreams. But he also spoke of the loneliness, the empty relationships, the way success had felt hollow without someone meaningful to share it with. "I never married," he admitted, staring into the dancing flames. "I tried to date, tried to convince myself I could love someone else, but no one ever made me feel the way you did, the way you still do." Emma felt her heart racing. "James, I can't ask you to take responsibility for us. We're not your burden." "You're not asking," he said softly, turning to face her. "I'm begging. Stay here, Emma, both of you. Let me take care of you the way I should have been doing all along. Let me give Tommy the childhood he deserves. But what will people say? Your business associates, your friends." James reached across and took her hands in his touch gentle but firm. "I don't care what anyone thinks. The only thing that matters is that life has given us a second chance. I'm not going to waste it worrying about other people's opinions." Outside, the storm was beginning to ease, the heavy rain softening to a gentle drizzle. But inside the mansion, Emma felt something blooming in her chest that she had thought was lost forever. Hope. Tommy stirred in his sleep, and both Emma and James moved to comfort him. Their hands met as they adjusted his blanket, and James smiled, the same boyish grin she remembered from their teenage years. "We'll figure everything out together," he promised. "All of it, one day at a time. Tommy will never have to worry about being hungry again, and neither will you." Emma looked around the magnificent library, then at James's kind face, then at her son sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. Sometimes, she realized, the most unexpected storms bring you exactly where you need to be. The rain had stopped completely now, and silver moonlight streamed through the tall windows, painting everything in the soft glow of new beginnings.